it's not always down to one person that's supported in that journey. There's a lot of people, certainly in that 12 years when I was at West Brom, that facilitate a lot of the development of some of these players.
What do you think the main catalyst is in terms of making it as a professional footballer?
That connection with the players. I think sometimes we underestimate relationships and how you make the kids feel. There's no shortcuts to becoming a really, really good coach or a top coach or elite coach, if that's what you want to call it. Some of the challenges I find today with some coaches, they want to get there as quick as possible. They want to be managers or first team coaches or under-18 coaches or 21s coaches or whatever. And some of it is you have to go through the process, you have to go through the hard yards. The biggest one is resilience. The game throws loads at you. If you're not prepared to, I suppose, tackle the highs and the lows and deal with that, they all had a real hunger to want to do the work and do the extra.
I just want to begin by asking you how your time at Birmingham's been since you've joined the football club.
Yeah, in terms of where the club's trying to go at the moment, it's quite an exciting place to be in terms of the way the club wants to go and where the club wants to get to in the next certainly 5 years. We want to be a club that's competing in the Premier League. We want to have an academy that's thriving not only locally but nationally, and trying to bring through as many homegrown players as we can. Through the club is something which certainly excites us.
And in terms of obviously the location being in the Midlands, do you feel that catchment area and that development growth is realistic based on what the club and the ambitions are there?
Well, it's crazy really. I mean, I've always worked at clubs within the Midlands. I've been fortunate enough to work at a lot of clubs within the Midlands. So I've been quite kind of local based throughout the sort of 25 years that I've been fortunate to be involved in football. And I remember always thinking, certainly in some of the previous clubs that I've worked at, that if someone could get a hold of Birmingham City, it would be, it is a sleeping giant in terms of what it could be, the potential of what it could be. I remember when I was there as a part-time coach back in 1999 to 2000 season, when it was an established academy that was really thriving, producing quite a lot of players at the time. This was way before the Triple P sort of times came along. It always goes in kind of cycles in terms of where the certain clubs in the Midlands are. And I remember back then it was a club that was thriving with young talent. Obviously competing with a local team down the road, Aston Villa. But it was always a club, as I say, that I used to look at and go, if someone could get hold of this, and really take it to where they want to take it. You've got a lot of fan base around the area that locally, if you're a Blues supporter, you want to play for Blues. It's a privilege to be part of that.
Do you feel that intrinsic drive based on the fact that you kind of know the area and you know the surroundings, and you mentioned the fandom element and everything surrounding the Midlands in terms of the football clubs? Do you feel that's in you to serve Birmingham successfully based on that drive that you've had for maybe your upbringing supporting the club?
Yeah. It's, I suppose you've got a little bit more of an intrinsic sort of motivation to want the club to do well and to help the club do well. That's not to say I've not had that in any of the previous clubs I've worked at, because before you go into, you're there to try and make it better. But certainly with Birmingham, it's a club close to my heart, and a club that I grew up supporting, and a club that I'm really privileged to be part of now. In terms of this next cycle of where we want to take it, it's an exciting project and time for anyone involved in the club. And certainly, you've only got to look at this season. The 5 in League One. They've got a Wembley final to look forward to next month. And just in terms of the fans that you see every single week down at St Andrews and Knighthead Stadium now. It's that I think they actually see where the club's trying to go. It's quite exciting for them, because there are some really, really good times coming at the football club, and I think they can see that.
Are you going to Wembley?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm going along with all the fun.
I got my ticket last week, so yeah, I'm looking forward to that. You mentioned 25 years in the game. Have you seen the game evolve since when you began to where you are now?
It's changed a lot. Obviously, when I first got involved, to where it is now, I've seen a massive change, certainly through different periods of that 25 years. So, and then when the EPPP, Elite Player Performance Plan, came in, I think it was back in 2012, I think when it first came in. And it was quite interesting because when I was certainly at West Brom in 2008 to when that period started to happen around like the Premier League, trying to almost get hold of academies and make academies a little bit more accountable, but also, almost trying to develop better homegrown players for the national game, but obviously putting the projects in place of where we're going to try and produce better players, for the England teams, but also for the Premier League. And it was an interesting time because certainly in the build up to that, I mean, we were fortunate we had Dan Ashworth, who at the time was a technical director who was ahead of the time.
So is this at West Brom now?
Yeah. It was a really interesting period because it was almost like we had our act together. We had a philosophy, we had a alignment from first team all the way down to under nines. We had best practice. We had position specific programs, which was unheard of at certainly some of the clubs I'd been fortunate to be around. And in terms of us competing on the stage across all the age groups nationally, people was going, what is going on at that club? We were getting into finals, competing against Chelsea's and teams like that. And people was going, there's something really going on at this club. We were ahead of the time in terms of school release programs. I think we were one of the first clubs to have a school release program at 9s all the way up to 16s, which is where you get them out for a day to do additional training. So we were very, very big on the contact at the time. I think we were very, very fortunate to have a fantastic group of staff that I think it's unique really to what you might have now across the game. But somehow we ended up being a group of staff that were young, hungry, up and coming, wanting to develop kids, wanting to make an academy the best it could be within the area. And everyone was put in the same direction. So we were like ahead of the game really in terms of some of the things we were doing. And it was almost like the EPPP allowed all the other clubs to get their act together and started becoming a bit more accountable, getting philosophies, getting all the different things that we'd been doing for 4 years, get their house in order a little bit. Now, it's not to say that we sort of fell by the wayside. It just meant that we had to up our game a little bit, but I think it allowed other clubs to up their game. So certainly in the sort of like the last 10 years, the EPPP that Premier League set up, it's certainly improved a lot of the English talent. You've got better technical players now, certainly it's improved the national game, in terms of what we've done for England teams and things. So I suppose that was the first real change. And then,
well, if I stop you there, you mentioned talent. How has it developed talent in terms of producing the players that you had at West Bromwich Albion? Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on how the coaching system and how the methodology at that football club at the time has benefited players and internationally as well as, down the pyramid as well?
But again, I'll go back to that period. I was an up and coming coach that was learning my trade, as well as a number of coaches. I mean, we were fortunate we had people like Aaron Danks, who's now our first team assistant manager at Bayern Munich, and there was people like Jimmy Shane, who's obviously gone doing different things in the game. He's currently at Aston Villa. There was a lot of good wing talent of coaches that all come from the same upbringing of courses, really, which again I think is different to what it is now, when we talk about how the game's changed. But you had a number of staff that were were all sort of aligned in terms of processes. So things around like position-specific programs, we used to run a unit program in a day release. We used to run a position-specific program religiously, across 9s all the way up to 21s, that really focused on the individuals and helped the individuals in terms of their playing positions and learn their craft. We had core skill sessions, which was about teaching the players the brilliant basics, passing, receiving, defending 1v1, attacking 1v1. So there was almost like a curriculum of programs, but also best practice. So we're all singing off the same hymn sheet. Then the other thing as well at the time, we all knew all the players across the whole age groups from 9s to 21s, because certainly with the way it was set up, we all used to work across all the different phases from 9s all the way up to 21s, which again is quite unique, because I know certainly now, it becomes a little bit more phase specific, or you've now got full-time age groups at every age group, and they just tend to focus on being an under 10s coach or an under 9s coach or under 14s. So you don't always get that continuity of coaches working across the spectrum. We'd have coaches working with the 9s to 11s, on the brilliant basics, on a regular basis, and then we'd be jumping across then in the evening to work with 15, 16-year-olds, and then in the daytime you might be working with 18s to 21s. So you were having to almost adapt all the time and tailoring your sessions around what the kids need, but you almost also knew what the kids needed on that part of the journey. So again, it was a real technical focus on trying to develop players that were going to be technically really, really good at managing the ball, really good at passing and receiving the ball, but also good in certain areas, being excellent at ball managing and manipulating the ball and beating players 1v1. There was the same at one stage where, because we were doing so well with the amount of England players that we were producing for the national team, at certainly 15s up to 21s, we were very, very strong on producing 9s, 7s, 11s and number 10s. It was quite ironic. We weren't blessed with defensive players at the time, but they used to say, if you want to go and find some good forwards, go to that club, and they'll, because of the programs we were running, we were really homing in on those positions. And then again, with them getting national exposure, it wasn't just for the England teams, it was for, we had a few with Wales, we had a few with Ireland, we had all sorts of different players. I think we had one with Scotland as well, actually, from what I remember. But they were getting that exposure as well, which was also helping the football club in terms of, I suppose if you want to call it, exposure to talent. You know what I mean? But we were also very, very blessed with local recruitment. So we had a very, very good head of recruitment at the time that was virtually had the whole of the Midlands area. He was getting players in before some of the other clubs were getting them.
So in terms of that talent, do you want to maybe elaborate on the talent that came through? Just because there might be people who are listening that are familiar with obviously the West Bromwich Albion system, but they might not be aware of the journeys of some of the players that have come out of the system. So was there anyone that stood out during that time for you as a coach that has gone on to impress you, or gone on to make a good career in the game?
There was loads, and when I say loads, there was loads of players that have gone on to have a really, really good career in the game at different levels, and I could give you a whole list of players, and there was some real standout ones. There's players such as who's doing really, really well at the moment with Aston Villa. Morgan Rogers was one that was fortunate to see his journey from 9s all the way up to 18s before we got a move to Man City. There's players like Louis Barry, who, it was ironic that we had a 16-year-old that was deemed good enough to go to a Barcelona club, and it's ironic. It's unreal, really, when you think about it, that, we've got an English talent pool that overseas are seen and want them to almost go there and, and be good enough to be in that environment. We have quite a host of players that do really, really well on the circuit at the moment, across Premier League. I think Morgan's Champions League as well now. So you've got, Champions League players. We had players that were coming through before that. I think it's quite ironic because we've got I think Chris Wood at the moment, who's doing really, really right, not enough for us. Again, people don't realise he actually come through the West Bromwich Albion academy. There's the whole list of players that we were fortunate to have, played a part in facilitating their sort of career and helping them get to where they want to get to at that small time in their sort of youth development program. Really.
Did you get a feeling, Mike, when you're coaching those players? Do you get a feeling that they could go on to make it to the levels that they have? You mentioned Champions League footballer, Barcelona, even Chris Wood, will be playing Champions League football next year with Forest in terms of their performance. Do you get a feel when you're coaching that this is going to maybe transpire, or is it something that doesn't necessarily enter an academy coach's head at that time? Just interested on that process as a whole.
Well, it's all right. I mean, if we're talking about Morgan's age group, and again, I was fortunate to see his journey from under 9, where he used to pick him up from his school to bring him in on day release. But his particular age group, there was probably 4 standout players that I remember, and seeing them come up through the ranks, they were always your best kind of players around that age group. And there was obviously more, and there was Taylor Gardner-Hickman, who is now doing really, really well at Birmingham. They were the 2 standouts. There was an Alex Gilbert in there who, I know he's done really, really well at Middlesbrough. I think he's just gone out alone at Chartered.
Finn Azaz was in the form?
Finn Azaz was in the age group above.
Oh, okay.
But again, even the age group above, you had your Finn Azaz, you had the Tom Nathan Ferguson, who I think got a big move to Crystal Palace. They played about 20 games, the first team for West Brom the following season after being an under 18 player. I'm trying to think who else we had in there. There was a Ryan Tulloch, who at time broke into the first team as a young 17-year-old.
Was Fellows in there as well?
So Tom Fellows was in Louis Barry's age group. Yeah. So it's almost like every year, if you're going from Finn Azaz's year to Morgan's year, even though Morgan and Josh Griffiths was another one that played up in Finn Azaz's sort of age group. You had an underbelly all the time, and this is why the recruitment and even the way the academy was run. At times we had Mark Harrison and Steve Hopcroft that were very, very key to that academy program in terms of the way it was running and the recruitment side of it. Tom Fellows, his age group, had a whole host of players. You had Caleb Taylor in there. You had Louis Barry. I remember we had Rico Richards. Again, I don't know where he is now, but
it's Port Vale with Darren Moore, Rico Richards. Yeah.
I think Raheem Harper's a possibility as well. So Raheem Harper was the age group above Fiazaz. So we had Kane Wilson in there. So there's all these different players now that are all on the circuit, which it's great to see so many players having a career in the game, and even the ones who are not having a career in the game, that were still involved with it in some degree, have ended up going on to do good things.
So just on that, you mentioned the 25 years that you've seen players grow and develop, and you mentioned those players that have obviously gone on to make it and have different types of careers. What do you think the main catalyst is in terms of making it as a professional footballer? Because there might be people listening and watching this that are really interested on what it takes to get to that elite level. What do you think, from a personal point of view, that's down to?
There's a few things really. Biggest one is resilience, because the game, same as a coach, really, the game throws loads at you, and if you're not prepared to, I suppose, tackle the highs and the lows and deal with that, there's a player in there that I mentioned, like George Harman, who, if you look at his career, he was in Finn Azaz's age group. From under 9s all the way up to under 21s, he was always the captain of the team, and he was Mr. Reliable. Would always, you always knew what you were going to get from that player, and he's someone that went all the way through the journey, had won loads and loads of experiences, national competitional finals and everything with the age groups. They're a very, very strong age group, like some of the other ones below, had similar success. And this was a lad who sort of left the club at 21. And I remember his dad ringing me up going, he just wants to play football, is a real way of helping and stuff like that. And I remember speaking to our ex-21s manager, David Oldfield, who at times was at Oxford, I think it was Oxford United, in one of the national conference levels. He was managing there, and I thought, if there's a lad who just wants to play, it'd be worth having a look at. And he went down. He was travelling down from the Midlands down to Oxford, probably, I don't know, 3 times a week, playing on a Saturday, just enjoy his football again. He then, at the end of that season, he ended up being one of the best players that season. Ended up getting a move to Scottish Premier League. You know, and when you talk about resilience, there's so many players that drop out of the game, that drop down to that level, and they don't stick at it, and they just keep dropping down the levels. And certainly when you're talking about wanting to stay in the game and having that resilience, you know, that's one person that springs to mind in terms of just stuck at it, and he's reaped the rewards by playing in the Premier League now for the past 4 seasons, and a career. So resilience is a big one. A mindset.
What do you mean by that mindset? Is there certain characteristics within that?
There's a real inner confidence. You know, that they're one, that they're going to make it and make it the success of it. Not an arrogance, but a real inner confidence that they believe in what they're doing. They believe in their ability. They don't doubt themselves. And there's a real talent in terms of the basics that they do. They've got a real sort of they're very, very good at the basics of what they do in terms of their super strokes. You know, so if they're good dribblers and good finishers, they master that. They practice that every day. You know, again, just having that ability to want to go and do the extra. There are a lot of the players that I've been fortunate to see across, you know, West Brom, Burns, West Brom, certainly Aston Villa, Derby, and Wolves the last 3 years before coming to Birmingham. All the players that have thrived and gone through the different levels and are doing really, really well out alone, or, you know, are getting careers in the game, making debuts. They all had a real hunger to want to do the work and do the extra. Also, you know, at the same time, real good human beings but just, you know, have got a real good baton in terms of around a good network around them that are sort of pushing that.
What was your proudest moment at your time at West Brom? Youth Cup final?
Semi-final.
Semi-final.
Yeah.
Was it not at the Etihad?
It was at the Etihad.
Yeah.
I
I was at the game.
It was at the Etihad.
Yeah, I was in the crowd. I was in the home end. I was in the away end, really.
The actual, I've got to say, the whole cup run was exciting.
Don't mean to put word in your mouth, but would that be a highlight?
Yeah, it was one of the highlights at West Brom at the time, I suppose, because it was we had one of the hardest runs. You know, we had to play an Arsenal team that had Saka in it, you know, and that was probably one of the toughest 20 minutes end to a game I've ever seen, where Josh Griffiths is pulling out save after save. And then we got into a quarter final. I think at the time there was a big thing about it being the first time in 46 years, whoever it was. And then we played Everton. And I remember we beat Everton at the Hawthorns 4-3. Taylor Hipton came on and scored an unbelievable goal. And obviously we went and played a very, very strong Man City team, where I know there's a lot of that team, you know, a lot of them are playing across Premier League and Champions League and all sorts now. But yeah, I suppose in terms of the experience, that was probably one of the highlights. But there was loads of highlights across the 12 years I was there. You know, even little national under-12 final was there, and the 13s and 16s games and stuff like that. There's a lot of experiences that a lot of us had that I suppose helped us get better as coaches, really.
You mentioned Peter Gilbert. Did you find yourself enjoying the moment with him during those seasons together?
Well, it was interesting with Pete. Pete obviously retired and came into the club. He actually originally first started working with me as an under-15, 16s coach. I suppose where I am now as head of coaching, in terms of developing coaches, some of those moments of seeing coaches, support coaches through their, starting as a coach or developing as a coach, that I suppose they're moments which you look back on and you think, you played a little bit of a part of trying to help them. Not that they help themselves get better and all the rest of it, but I remember when Pete first come in and, he spent the first season with me with the under-16s, and then obviously moved up to do the PDP and stuff like that, and then I sort of joined back with him a few years later. And what was brilliant for Pete was when I left to go Derby to do a head of coaching role, he sort of continued the learning and the growth that you'd seen over like the 4 years, then the first 10 into it. It was brilliant for him because I think he got to a semi-final the following year, right? With it would have been with Tom Fellows. It might have been Tom Fellows' age group, but it was against Villa, ironically. So it was really interesting because obviously I'd gone from Derby to Villa, and then I'm sort of like I'm finding that a Villa team facing the West Brom team in the semi-final. It was quite a weird moment. That we had done. It was good to see him have some of that success again. But with another coach, with Lee Dan, he was his assistant. So I know Lee's recently had a really, really good cup run with West Brom as well. It's good as well because I think Jimmy Shan's currently in the semi-final with Aston Villa this season. So it's great to see some of these coaches experiencing some of those moments as well. So yeah, it was a lot of coaches I've been fortunate to work with. Certainly across the 12 years there, certainly within this role, at Derby and basically Wolves and now with Birmingham. And that's part of the job I enjoy, trying to support coaches get to where they want to get to as a coach or a manager, and seeing them start off on a journey, whatever that might be, whether you start off as a part-time coach, volunteer coach, or they're in a full-time coach that wants to be a manager. There's been a number of coaches I've been fortunate to try and support that had aspirations to be first-team coaches, and you've put a kind of a development plan in place, within their journey and different things to try and help them. And don't get me wrong, they do it themselves, but you have a bit of a support network there to try and encourage them and support them. And
what makes a good coach?
Question. For me, it's you got to have a very strong knowledge of the game, be a student of the game. Obviously, you have your skills to be able to coach on the football pitch helps. But big one, which I think is underestimated within coaching, because what I find with a lot of young coaches today, they all think it's about the X's and O's and tactics, and whether that's because it's the way the sort of the FA courses have gone. I think sometimes we underestimate relationships, and how you make the kids feel and how you make the players feel, and that connection with the players. I was always very big. I still am very big in terms of when I coach. It's trying to create an environment where the kids feel that it's enjoyable, it's fun. Because I think sometimes what we forget, and certainly, and this is academy football now, where there's a lot of pressure to try and produce players. There's also a lot of pressure on the kids to try and become a footballer, and sometimes the fun gets lost because ultimately kids start the game, don't they? Because they enjoy playing it, and that there's always this pressure now in academies where you've got to get the next year, you've got to get you've got to try and stay signed for the next year, and they have all these retain releases now. I don't quite like the word release. I think it should be retain and reroute. Because you might have to reroute to another environment that might actually end up being better. But I think that's certainly some of the things that I've been fortunate to try and help players with over the years, where you might not be the right club for you now, but we'll try and reroute you to another club where you can continue that journey. And actually sometimes that journey might be a better route to get where you want to get to. So I do think there's a lot of pressure on kids today. So we're going back to what makes a great coach. It's kind of understanding where the players are with their development. it's having an understanding of player journey. It's also having an understanding that, at times, they are kids. They have a lot of pressures. I think that sometimes people forget what it's like to be a 15 or 14-year-old and the pressures that they're going under, so it's sometimes taking a little step back and understanding where they are. But it's having a connection with them. It's trying to build that relationship and understanding them as people and human beings. And I think if you can do that as a coach, you tend to find the kids will enjoy your sessions, but also they'll want to do well for you.
Yeah. In terms of that process, would you say that's the hardest part, being a senior member of a football club or making decisions based on the terms that you used, retain and reroute? Do you think that's hard? Is that the hardest process as being a coach? That's what I'm trying to say, based on your position and your decision-making process and that emotional aspect of trying to support the well-being of an individual or thinking about other alternatives.
Any club I worked at, when I was certainly as a coach, so for example, I'd get given a group of 15, 16s or even 18s, and I'd look at them and go, right, how am I going to make you better? So, because they're always passing through you, to the next age group or the next coach. I just look at it and go, right, when you leave here in 12 months, I'm going to make sure that I've made all of you better. I understand you and got a relationship with you where there's an element of trust. But at the same time, even if this football club isn't going to be for you in terms of a scholarship or a professional contract, I'm going to make sure I can get you another club where you can continue that journey. So we used to have an awful lot, certainly in 12 years I was at West Brom, where even when it wasn't the good news around the decision of getting a scholarship at the club, the reroute process that we had in place was brilliant, because you pick the phone up to a lot of people around the circuit, around the Midlands, like a Warsaw, even in the Birmingham or wherever it might be, and you'd get them in front of them, and then when they get there, they'd 9 times out of 10 get an opportunity and a scholarship offered to stay on the train for another 2 years. And ironically, in some cases, someone would end up making their professional debuts quicker than some of the ones that are at the club we were at, because at the time we were in the Premier League and things like that. So you'll find a lot of them that would maybe go League One or League Two, or in some cases Championship. Suddenly you'd find them making a debut because they'd go in there and they'd be a really, really good player in that environment. So I'd see a lot of that, and that was almost my job as a coach, to try and get you a scholarship or get you a pro contract. Or I used to have a big thing about I wanted my 16s jumping over the 18s into the 21s.
Okay.
If I get a 16 into the first team, great, but it was always about trying to help them understand where they want to get to. And there's little things like you could set out little goals, we had a lad called KD Young. I think he's been involved with the first team there. I use him as an example. And then I remember him sitting down with me at the start of the season. I went, right, what's the goals this year? What do you want to do? He was a 15-year-old lad. And I was quite hard on him at the start. I remember when I left, he was going to say, he hated you first 4 months. But he was really upset when I obviously moved to go to another club. But he was, I remember saying to me, right, I want to make my under 15s debut for England this year. I want to play in the 18s, and I want to be a regular starter in the 16s. So 3 simple goals. And he ended up achieving that by the end of the 12 months. And you see that, but you got to have almost like a little bit of a sat nav on where you want to get to, and then it's your job as a coach to try and help facilitate that. Now you can't do that for everyone, but if they've got a bit of talent and you see that and you can nurture it and you can look for opportunities to try and do that. And I was quite fortunate, because on one of the occasions, I think I was asked to go and do the 18s down at Bright. It was around when they were doing really well with the FA Youth Cup. I think it was around the time when the 21s had to play against the first team, against Liverpool.
I think it was Liverpool in the World Cup Championship, and World Club Championship, and they played a second team, and I think it was put on television, and it kind of was blown up in that sense.
Yeah, but there was a lot going on that week.
Right.
I remember I was asked to go and do the 18s, and take a really young group down there. So like a couple of first years, few second years, but like we had to fulfill the team with a couple of 15s. I remember we took, I think I actually took a 15-year-old goalkeeper who played that day. It was unbelievable. I remember Caden making his debut, and I remember a lad that Charles Patterson making his debut as well for the 18s. So they had two 15s in there. And yeah, I remember us getting battered. But it was brilliant in terms of the day because that particular lad had fulfilled one of his little soul goals. Yeah. I think he'd also got into the England team not long before with the 15 spot or something. So that's part of being a coach, try and help them in terms of what their seasonal goals are or what their aspirations are. But you've got to have an idea of what they want to achieve, but also at the same time, you've got to build that relationship to understand it as well. So,
but based on the element of exit programs, as you kind of alluded to, if you look at the stats, is it 0.0001% of those that play football make it? And I think, again, going on data from Tony Pulis's recent documentary on Sky Sports, was around 9% within academies going to make it. Do you feel those exit strategies and those programs are better now in comparison to maybe before?
I think they're a little bit more streamlined and in process now. It's weird because all the clubs I've ever worked at, and certainly I know at Birmingham, we've got a really, really strong sort of reroute program, but we've got a very, very good player care team that support that as well as coaches. I think back in the day, I don't know, before this was in place, I think it's really probably been in place the last 4 years, really, when clubs have really had to start really looking at this. It was very much left down to the coaches, their relationship with the parents, and try and help them reroute to another club or to another process where it might be university or my first experience of it was because I was doing a bit with the education as well as coaching. It was always left down to me to sort of try and help the under 18s or 21s or 23s at the time, find an exit route, whether that be, at the time I know we had a link with Hartbury College and we had different processes that we could help, and whether that's overseas as well. So we had a few that went to America and stuff like that. But it was very much left down to you wanting to care for the players and help it, whereas I know now a lot of clubs have got player care specialists that also support with that. Premier League have put a lot of initiatives in place to try and support with people that need to reroute to another industry, or and whether that's a degree program and continue doing football, or whether that's another opportunity to find another club to start the journey. So I do think it's a little bit more aligned across all the clubs, because it wasn't probably like that at some of the DFL tours, but it is now.
If I bring you back to being a coach, you mentioned the players that you developed, and people might go to you, Mike, you're the person that's developed Morgan Rogers, Louis Barry, all these great players that you've named. What is the biggest misconception about coaching? Because it's glamorized in that sense, but is there anything that you think is not really spoken about based on the industry itself?
First of all, I haven't produced those players that produce themselves. Okay. There's a misconception sometimes where I think coaches tag themselves onto a player and almost believe that they've produced them.
I suppose that's ego in a way.
So any player that I've had the fortune to work with over 25 years, and even the players that are, even though in the role that I'm currently in now, which is more around sort of managing and supporting the coaches, if I drop into a session, I did an under 10 session the other day, as a support, because I think one of the coaches was away, there'll be players in there over the next 7 years that might make debuts for Birmingham City, which would be brilliant. It's not always down to one person that's supported in that journey. There's a lot of people, certainly in that 12 years when I was at West Brom, that facilitate a lot of the development of some of these players. For example, you have people like Darren Moore that, you're looking at his journey in terms of suddenly becoming a Premier League manager, and he was one of the coaches that gave, you know, people like Morgan and Ryan Tuller, you know, an actual debut, you know, for the football club. And there's a number of managers that give opportunities to players, so that's part of it as well. Because without opportunity, you know, they might not get that chance to really go on and kick on. Just like there's been a number of players at Birmingham over the years, because, you know, one thing we'll all say about Birmingham, their productivity in terms of players they've produced over the years, and let's be honest, they've produced one of the best players in the world, haven't they? And Jude Bellingham. You know, there's a lot of players that have come through programs, and there's so many people that have supported in that development of that player, whether it's sports science, whether it's, you know, player care, whether it's the coaches, academy managers that have supported it. The recruiters sometimes don't get the plaudits because without the people that have found those players to bring them in, they see something in, and yeah, they might not be at that particular football club in that particular time, you know. And I imagine some of the players that have really gone on to do well probably would have had at some point in their time loads of clubs that are sort of sifting around them. You know, you look at someone like a Morgan. I mean, he ended up at 18. You know, going to Manchester City, who continued that development, and then the low moves that he would have had, no doubt, you know, which then led him to Middlesbrough, and then the opportunity to get brought from Middlesbrough to where he is. You know, without them doing the work themselves and having some of those attributes that you need to be a top player, and there would have been coaches that some of these players have worked with, certainly since leaving. You know, if it's all about West Brom, that have helped almost take their career to the next level. So but I do find it fascinating sometimes when coaches do say, "Oh, I coached him," or I you know, there's so many different people, and I think the biggest ones that sometimes get missed are the parents. The parent is always the first coach, I say. So the network and support that the parents have to do for some of these kids is fascinating and unbelievable, really, in terms of, you know, these are parents that are working really, really hard across the week, having to go and take their kids to training 3 nights a week, giving up the Saturdays, giving up the Sundays. You know, that if you think about that support over 10 years, and then they obviously continue when they make it to professionals.
And in terms of you as a coach, you mentioned the element of sacrifice and resilience, along with other things. What have you done to become an elite coach and a top coach? Is there anything that you can reflect on based on your journey that has got to where you are today?
Sacrifices. Yeah, this industry. I think some people underestimate. So I think back, if you want to start 25 years ago, you know, probably doing a level 2 course back in 1998 when I first started, and I was fortunate to have a young coach at the time that was, you know, recommend to go and do a level 2 course, and it was almost like my first mentor. Ironically, I was speaking to him on Saturday on the scene for since we were on other days. But he was someone that was very, very supportive in giving me an opportunity to go and work with him. And then getting opportunities, I suppose, if you want to talk about sacrifices that you had to make. When I first started off, I would say the first 4 years, and if you look at some of the coaches that I've mentioned, they'll be very, very similar. We spent almost like 3 to 4 years of really the hard yards, you know, doing any type of coaching. You know, I'm talking grassroots, schools, district football, and talking going into like a sports hall with about 30 kids, you know, it's on a postage stamp, and, you know, it's put on a session, you know, an after school club, and doing loads of coaching, just any type of coaching that was thrown at us, mini soccer centres, half term, soccer camps. You know, there's loads of like, I remember I used to do like soccer camp with Richard Beale. Yeah, he was down the 21s coach at West Brom, and he's had loads of experiences as a coach and even managed. You know, I think he's done a couple of stints. I think he jumped in and did first team at Birmingham for a while when he was there. So there's loads of people that have all started off doing the hard yards, And then that opportunities to go in, whether it's full-time in academy football. When I was quite fortunate, I was doing my coaching, and because at the time, was there going to be a career in coaching, I rerouted into like doing a PE degree as well. So I mean, and sort of I did a little bit of a stint as a PE teacher as well as still coaching. So even learning skills of managing kids in a rough area in North Birmingham, just learning how to deal with challenging kids. There's loads of different experiences that you've got to try and almost go through. There's no shortcuts to become a really, really good coach or a top coach or elite coach, if that's what you want to call it. I think some of the challenges I find today with some coaches, they want to get there as quick as, but they want to be managers or first team coaches or under 18 coaches or 21s coach or whatever. And some of it is you have to go through the process. You have to go through the hard yards. And it's tough. And sometimes there's days where you think, oh, am I doing this? But if you actually go through that, when you actually get there, you are ready for it. I mean, I think back to, certain some of the times I spent about 7 years. I did the stints as a foundation coach, doing all the, the 9s to 12s and all that sort of stuff. And then I remember spending almost like 7 to 8 years as a youth development coach. And at no point really, I always had an eye on, I wouldn't mind being a professional development coach under 18 league and stuff like that. I thought it will happen when it happens. I think what I will say is when the opportunity was given to us to be an under 18 manager, I was really ready for it. Whereas there might have been opportunities prior to that, and I was going, no, I'm not ready.
Yeah.
But I also knew I wasn't ready. But some people would just jump in at first, I think, and might not do very, very well at it. So it's a little bit of having a patience. I think some of the challenges with coaches face today, I look back at the coach education program that I was fortunate to be part of, and we had some unbelievable tutors. We're talking people like, I'm thinking around the Birmingham area, there was people like Tom Stack, who was really, really respected as a coach developer. At the time, there was a guy called Mark Fogarty that were really, really good within their sort of coach development areas that helped a lot of us. And then there was people like at the FA courses, like Stuart Hall, who at the time was my academy manager at Birmingham. There's so many top coaches, John Peacock, loads of top coaches that were sort of on these courses that we were fortunate to get on. B license, A license. The A license as well was tough. I think the level 1, level 2 now is online. Yeah. We had to go away and do a couple of reads for the level 2, and you were coaching, and there was a fail or pass. But it made you really learn about the technical skills. And B license was a tough school, and the A license was a tough school. I think when I did the A license, there was about 40 of us and only 6 passed. You had to go back and be reassessed. And people are so quick to want to get on to the next level. I was fortunate enough to get on the pro license 3 years ago. And that was the first time I'd applied for it. And I think I got my A license in 2008, I think it was. And I'm applying for the pro license in 2022. Most people do their A license, want to get on the pro license as possible. It's knowing when you're ready to go and do courses, and also why you're doing the course. Are you doing it for a piece of paper, or you're actually doing it because you want to learn, and you're at a stage of development where it's time to learn. I do fear sometimes that a lot of coaches today want to just chase the paper because they get the paper. I'm an A license coach, I'm a B license. It's not the case. It's actually enjoying the process of doing the course. And
element of patience and competencies as well. You mentioned that element of feeling confident going into a role. I suppose that kind of summarises that quite well. One question I'm going to ask you then is head of coaching, your experience in terms of academy coaching, and then this role now, head of coaching. What does that look like, and what have you learned throughout the journey that you've been on that has enabled you to support others and develop others as a whole?
The head of coaching role is a fascinating role because it looks different at different clubs. I've always been very, very clear what a head of coaching role is at this is my third stint now. of doing it at 3 different clubs. And every club I've worked at, it's been different. But the role, I've been very, very clear on what I see the role as. And I think at some clubs, the role might look more around player development with a little bit of coaching support. In some cases, it's some heads of coaching, they almost just work at PDP end and don't really deal with anything younger. This particular role is all about trying to develop the coaches at 9s all the way up to 21s, but also anyone that's on the periphery of trying to get into first team. It's always trying to support where they are on that journey. I think what's fortunate for me is because I've worked across all the phases, I can relate to each sort of phase and where coaches are across their different part of their journey. So I think that's important. So one, I've been able to have seen the journey as coaches and lived an 18s role or lived a under 14s or under 9s role, because I do think that really helps you relate to the coaches, and then you can also then support the coaches. But it's about trying to help the coaches grow, help the coaches try and develop to where they want to get to, because just like the players, they've got a development plan. It's also being realistic with the development plan. The challenge I probably have in all the 3 clubs I've done this role now is how you manage to get around everybody, to support everybody, and you have to be really, really strategic in terms of knowing when to sort of, right, he needs a bit there and he needs a bit now, and also at the same time it's trying to keep a focus on the player development side as well. Because I look at it, if you're producing good coaches, you're going to produce good players, and it's trying to align that. But also the coaches have to have some sort of clarity in terms of what they do, so an alignment to what's the playing philosophy look like. Is the principles that align for first team all the way down? Is the core practices, best practices that everyone can work off that can help them? So it's trying to support the coaches with resources to develop. Then also what you're going after when you actually go and support them. There's real clarity on, right, this is what it should look like, and they've got clear clarity and confidence in terms of what they're doing. But again, a lot of coach development really is about putting other people forward first and trying to put their needs forward rather than your own needs.
Mike, good luck with that. Good luck with obviously your spell at Birmingham. We can kind of conclude there. Have you enjoyed the conversation, by the way?
It's been really interesting.
Yeah, you enjoy that? Like I said, I just want to wish you all the best. Obviously, we worked with each other many, many years back at West Bromwich Albion. Good luck with everything at Birmingham City, and also, future adventures as well. You never know where things lead within football. But I just want to thank you for speaking so elegantly and competent throughout this last hour. And good luck. Good luck with everything that you do.
Thank you. Thanks for taking time to let me come and share some experiences.